Well, this could be our last chance for peace, or we could be facing 10 more years of war, 10 more years of the United States funding this pointless war right now in Ukraine. That's exactly what's about to happen. In fact, and by the way, we predicted this last year on Redacted. I think, in fact, I had a back and forth discussion with a military analyst, and I said, are we heading for another endless war? Are we heading for another Afghanistan? To which that person said, I don't believe that's the case. I think it may be, a year or two. But now it looks like we could be heading for another Afghanistan. Trillions of dollars later and nothing to show for it. Over the weekend, Ukrainian President Zelensky gave an interview where he let the cat out of the bag, that he's been working with the Biden administration basically to craft a 10-year plan to fund with weapons and aid to this proxy war in Ukraine. David Sachs tweets this. Zelensky announces that Ukraine is working on a security agreement with the United States that will fix levels of support for the next 10 years. The $61 billion was just the beginning. The next 2 U.S. presidents won't be able to switch it off.
Now, it does read, if you watch his Telegram channel where he announces this, it's all in Ukrainian, so we opted to just show you the quote rather than play you the video. But it does seem like he was not supposed to say this. Like, hey, I can't really say. It feels almost a little bit unsanctioned, like he's a little bit, it's the cart leading the horse, because it's what he wants to be true. It feels to me like the administration won't be happy to have to answer for this.
Well, look, he's not a career politician, right? So I think he may have let the cat out of the bag, because we're going to get to this in a second, but I think this is in keeping with some previous reporting from Politico and others on this exact story. So I think he is echoing what's already been reported. And I think reporters kind of got around him on this story, to be honest with you. So the ink is hardly dry on that bill to send $61 billion to Ukraine last week. And yet Zelensky now is working on this 10-year blank check, basically. So here is what he said on his Telegram, quote, today, our teams of Ukraine and the United States are working on a bilateral agreement on security, he said. We are working to commit to paper concrete levels of support for this year and for the next 10 years. It will include military, financial, political support, as well as what concerns joint production of weapons. But here's the part that really jumped out at me. He says, our goal is to make this agreement the strongest of all. We are discussing the specific foundations of our security and cooperation. Foundations of our security and cooperation. To me, that sounds like, when you say foundations, you're building something strong, right? You're building something that's going to last a long time, right? You're pouring concrete, you're building trenches, you're building something long. And I think Congressman Tim Burchett basically agrees. He says, when Zelensky says specific foundations, he's talking about your tax dollars. It doesn't matter how long he drags this war out if Ukraine gets rebuilt with American money.
Is Ukraine the next Hawaii? The next state of the United States?
51st state, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, and rebuilt from what? It's not like they're getting destroyed. If there's any destruction, it's in the Donbass and it's them doing it. So what are they getting the money to fix, to repair?
Well, this is where all this infrastructure money would come from, right? Like because if you see downtown Kiev, right, you see nightlife, new shops just opened. Partying downtown. So this is, of course, on the front lines. You're seeing towns like Kharkov. You're seeing these areas being destroyed and leveled, right? Because the fighting is so intense there. So this could be the next city to fall, right? Yep. So go ahead, Phil.
Here's the thing, like no amount of money. It doesn't matter how much money you throw at this. You can't bring back the dead. And they've lost so many people. Like you can't rebuild that. What are they going to do? Resurrect people? You can't do it. So it's like, it doesn't matter if they rebuild the buildings, who's going to be in them?
Right. That's why they keep saying peace in their pipe dreams of getting Crimea back, getting the Donbass back. These people who voted to leave Ukraine because they were so abused, but they want them back. It's like an abused husband, abused wife going back to the husband because they don't want to, and they're not going to get it back. So the more they say that, the more it's impossible to have a peace talk.
Douglas McGregor, friend of the show, Colonel Douglas McGregor, tweeted this: insanity. Biden's foolish actions could ensure war with Russia sooner rather than later. Trump's reckless and uninformed support for this new bill could convince Moscow that peace is impossible, regardless of whom Americans elect, without a Russian advance to NATO's eastern border. So 10 years, this could push Russia closer. Now, if do you think Russia's going to sit back and like allow this to happen? Like, again, I point out Putin has not bluffed once. I see comments from you all the time. You're like, when Putin says something, he does it. So regardless of what you think about him, I don't care what you think about the guy. If he's telling you what's going to happen and Russia says this is a red line for us, and NATO is going to funnel and the U.S. is going to put 10 years of money into an attack, we're going to level the place. It's not going to happen. Politico, though, I want to circle back on this.
But this tweet that we just showed is so depressing because it shows that we don't have a choice. Both leading candidates right now will continue this war. So Trump can continue to say the war in Ukraine would never have happened under my watch, which it didn't, or I would be able to negotiate an end to this because I'm pro-peace. Well, his support of this recent bill shows to the contrary. So it feels to me like we're in it. We can't do anything about it. We're not voting our way out of this.
I mean, unless RFK Jr., I've seen a lot of people lately saying maybe he's the only one. I've seen people tweeting about this. I mean, let us know. We're not picking a candidate here, but I'm saying, I've been really disappointed in his crazy, weird turn on Israel. But I mean, who else is going to close down all these military bases right now? I mean, to your point, this is all we got.
Yeah,
this is all we've got right now. And it's really, really disturbing. Anyway, so I want to circle back to Politico's reporting on this. You remember this a few weeks ago? This, I think, is part of this. So Trump proofing weapons for Ukraine. Allies consider moving arms groups into NATO. So this is an important story that Politico had, and it was an exclusive at the time, right? Which is this idea that we are going to put 10 years worth of monies available and weapons and aid and everything ready for Ukraine that would be Trump proof. That if Trump wanted to vote against this or stop it, that we would now have a mechanism in place to continue funneling money nonstop and weapons. So if Trump gets there and he decides he wants to end it, then we've got a thing in place already. And I think this is a lot of what things Zelensky was talking about. Don't you? I mean, this is what he was talking about. I just don't
understand the mechanisms, because when we saw Trump take office, he did leave organizations that were disproportionate to the United States, that the United States was paying more for. We saw him leave the Paris Climate Accord. How do they do that? What legalese is that strong?
Well, let's look into it. So this, I think, when you have those presidential authorizations, right, when you have those additional extra congressional authorizations, and Shea Bowes did a really good breakdown of all of the money, because every month, we talk about the $61 billion. It's not just $61 billion. It's monthly payments. Much as, we get all these big congressional moments where they get this big tranche of money. No, it's happening like every few weeks. We just don't hear about it because it's part of a presidential money that's being sent out. So here's how it would work. Watch Shea Bowes break this down.
And of course, it's also worth remembering that the US has already pumped over $100 billion of its own taxpayers' cash into the failing Ukrainian project. The scale of the spending is truly astounding, with two programs operating to fund Kiev. One is the Presidential Authority, and the other is the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, with one existing to replenish weapons and cash into the other. Since March 2022, $19 billion worth of orders have been financed into the U.S. military-industrial complex under this initiative alone.
You see all just floating by on the screen? Mm-hmm. Like every few weeks, these payments are made. Every few weeks. And they'll always find mechanisms and ways to make it happen. And the President of the United States can come in and do whatever he wants to do. But if all of these things are already in place, the deep state, there's very little he can do. And I think right now, sadly, I think Trump is being surrounded by a lot of swamp monsters that are driving him in a certain way. And I think that this is a huge red flag. I saw someone in the chat a moment ago say, I wouldn't trust RFK. He's a weasel. So, I guess this is what we got right now. So Trump is now being controlled by swamp monsters.
But I also see people in the chat saying Trump will end this. And I just want to know why you think that, because I would love to think that somebody will end this, but he supported this most recent package.
In fact, not supported it. He was instrumental in passing it.
He helped broker it.
No, I would seriously, and we're having a conversation here, right? No one's getting angry with anybody, right? No, don't draw your lines in the sand, right? We're having someone in the chat just said Trump would end it. Okay, please make a comment here. I want to hear why you think that, to Natalie's point. Again, he literally was instrumental in pushing this weapons package and money, $61 billion, through Congress. As Lindsey Graham said, without Trump, we wouldn't have got this thing. So again, how is he going to end it? Is this just like he was doing this right now, sleight of hand, and then when he gets in there in November,
to get the party support, to keep the party support?
I don't know. I mean, okay, something's going on here, but I feel like we're all being played right now.
Because that is playing to politicians. It's not playing to the American people. The American people do not support continued support of war in Ukraine or Israel. But that's what we get. So who's he playing to? Definitely not the voters. So
I don't know. I don't know who he's playing. I don't know. Again, I've seen, I think Colonel McGregor tweeted this today. He said, right now Trump, because remember, Colonel McGregor worked for Trump. And one of his biggest complaints is that he had too many people around him who were swamp monsters. They were deep staters, and they were basically controlling him. And his concern is he's being now controlled again by these people.
Well, because Scott Horton's great reporting in his book Enough Already is that when Trump said, let's just get out of Syria, let's just get out of Afghanistan, people are not safe there, we don't have any business there, can we do that? And yeah, there were people around him who said, no sir, we can't, because blah 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 blah. And he sort of was not nuanced enough to push back and was like, okay, I guess you're the experts. Will he do that again?
Red State in our chat says, Trump, you got some splaining to do.
Well, that's how I feel. Absolutely.
I mean, we'll invite Trump here on the show. I'd love to sit down with him again. I mean, I've interviewed him many, many times. I'd love to see if he'll sit down with Redacted in our studio and do an interview. And I'll ask him those questions. Mr. President, why did you support this massive boondoggle of a bill to Ukraine when Americans are sleeping on the street right now? What was going on here? That would be my first question to him, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And give me an answer. I want to hear your answer on that. I mean, that's a legitimate question. I also want to hear why he's been recently pushing vaccines again. And he's been, that's a legitimate question. We know the damage from the COVID vaccine. Why is this support? I don't know. I mean, Biden's out to lunch. He's a dementia patient, so he's totally done. And then RFK Jr.
whether he is or isn't, which he is.
Right. He's a weekend at Bernie's.
Yeah, he's a fruit cocktail. But we know what we're getting with his administration is more war, more biopharmaceutical complex, more censorship industrial complex, more removal of your liberties. All of those things come with Biden, right? Whatever.
More penises on women.
Yeah, all of those things. At least we know because we've been in it. We've been in this post-apocalyptic hell for 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let me get back to it. So we have this on top of all of this, right? So we just, the money, the 10 years, we also have this stunning new report out from a liberal website, the Daily Beast. Okay. This is the Daily Beast, totally liberal as they get. I think Chelsea Clinton's still on the board of the freaking website. Says Ukrainians don't even want this money. They don't even want this aid. Frontline Ukrainians fear new aid from U.S. will be a disaster. It's an interesting, eye-opening piece. I encourage you to read it because it's interviews with a number of frontline Ukrainians. And I'll just kind of read a part of it here. Signing into law a White House ceremony on Wednesday, Biden promised the arms shipment would begin immediately and hailed what he called a good day for world peace. The reaction here, meaning in Ukraine, near the front lines of the war, felt very different. Oleg sighed when the Daily Beast told him about the events 5,000 miles away in Washington, D.C. Are you serious? He said. Now this war will just continue. And so he goes on to explain how this money will just keep this, more people will be killed, and that the money will really not do anything to help Ukraine win the war. At the bottom, he says, in my mind, all of my friends, this money doesn't help Ukraine. Our country has too much corruption. So he's saying not only will this not help our country, it'll prolong the pain, and there's nothing we can do about it. In fact, this video today surfacing, this is just new video of the recruitment efforts right now. This man on his way home from work, see his work outfit on, work attire, being thrown in. He's pleading for people to help him to help him, and they're punching him in the face.
They just punched him in the face.
Yeah, they're like, oh, okay, you're going to come join the war. They're trying to get his legs in. Okay, I want to slide the door, but he's not having it. He's like holding on to the outside, and they're not going to be able to slide a door. And then other people are coming to help him. And like, what are you doing? And everyone's coming up.
Oh, look at that little girl. Get her out of there.
Yeah. Help me, he's yelling. Now, can you turn the music back on? I want you to hear this. Watch this. Look at his arm. Look at his arm here. Look at this soldier's arm and see if you recognize this symbol on this guy's arm. Ready? Oh, interesting. So when they tell us there are no Nazis, yes, they're not Nazis, right? They're just rounding people up, throwing them right in the truck, and he made his way off. They're like, all right, well, we couldn't get that guy. We'll go try to find somebody else who's coming home from work so we can throw them into the meat grinder.
Or we'll be back for you. We know your commute route.
So there's no corruption at all in Ukraine. There's no problems at all. There's no human rights problems at all in Ukraine. You literally have the Daily Beast, a liberal rag, telling us that there's so much corruption that all of the money that we're sending them now is going to be flushed right down the toilet in corruption. Most of it's going to wind up in the United States, but a lot of it's just going to go flushed right down the toilet.
Doesn't it feel so wrong to think that Democrats on their iPhones are like, oh, yeah, we're helping Ukraine, definitely. And there's someone who's on the front line saying, this means I can't go home for a long time.
He's literally there near the foxholes and the trenches, and he's like, he hears this 5,000 miles away, like Biden is doing like a little rallying point, and he's saying, this is not going to help us. It's going to kill us, actually.
My kids and I, we watched the Hunger Games, the last one, again this weekend. And I do believe that whenever you're feeling down about the state of the world, refer to the Hunger Games. They warned us. If you are one of those who are on your iPhone and just like, oh, great, more money for Ukraine, they're winning, and ignoring the plight of these actual people, you live in the Capitol. You're one of the bad guys. You are disconnected from the state of the world. You need to get off your phone and read a book, because people will die just because you only take a surface look at information and news headlines, and it's awful.
Yeah, not our audience, but I mean, all these, I see these like liberals with the Ukrainian flag still in their profile. Like, this is a big win for democracy.
Yeah.
Biden says this is a big win for democracy and world peace. What an idiot. So anyway, I want to highlight this before we go here on this story, which is the U.S. State Department. Now, the U.S. State Department every year comes out with their country reports on human rights practices. Now, we've highlighted this over the past few years. Before the war broke out in 2022, the U.S. State Department listed Ukraine as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. The human rights abuses were enormous. The disappearance of children, the disappearance of journalists, the disappearance of public officials, the torture. I mean, it was just horrendous stuff, right? So they want to be a member of the EU? Oh, okay, great. They want to be a member of NATO? Really? Well, the State Department just rolled out their latest country report on human rights practices last week. Of course, no one in the mainstream media covered this story, but Ukraine. It's hilarious. So I just want to highlight a few key. This is from the State Department. Now, what's hilarious about this is the State Department can't just talk about Ukraine. They always have to first have a first few sentences about Russia, and then they talk about Ukraine in every one of these paragraphs. It's actually pretty hilarious. So here's just one. I'm going to go through a couple of these quotes. In February 2022, the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, launched an unlawful and unprovoked full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which was marked by pervasive war crimes. I actually would love for them to highlight exactly where these war crimes are, because didn't we just have, we covered a few weeks ago here on the show, the IOC found no evidence of war crimes. The International Criminal Court, they found no evidence of war crimes. So where is the State Department?
That had to do with the downed airplane over the Donetsk region, that IOC investigation.
That's just one of,
yes.
Right? That was just one of the alleged war crimes that they came back and said, well, we can't find any evidence of that. So again, I'd love to know from the State Department, can you highlight exactly where all these war crimes are? Anyway, I digress.
No, the State Department's led by Antony Blinken, who this weekend said, we have, generally speaking, evidence that China's interfering with our elections. He provides none of that. He says it's general, which could be a hunch.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going on.
So show us all these war crimes, and we'll gladly show them here. Anyway, so then it talks about Russia. Anyway, the second quote here: significant human rights abuses committed by Russian forces in areas that were under Russian control involve severe. Again, this is supposed to be a report about Ukraine. So, and then they have wide-ranging cases, including credible reports of arbitrary or unlawful killings. Now this is like all Russia they're explaining here. So unlawful killings, enforced disappearance, torture, cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment, harsh, life-threatening prison conditions, arbitrary arrest or detention, political prisoners or detainees, particularly during filtration operations, interrogation, torture. So again, a forced transfer, deportation, wrongful adoption of Ukraine's children to Russian families. Oh yeah, right. Hey, we've highlighted deeply here on the child trafficking in Ukraine and how awful it is. So here, that's, again, this is all Russia, and this is supposed to be about Ukraine. Here's the third section here. Enforced disappearances and abductions, torture, physical abuses, serious restrictions on freedom of expression, media freedom, including violence or threats of violence against journalists, unjustified arrests or prosecution of journalists, censorship, existence of criminal libel, serious restrictions of internet freedom. Again, all about Russia. Okay, finally, we get our way down to the Ukrainian part of the Ukrainian report. There were also significant human rights abuses involving Ukrainian government officials, although not comparable to the scope of Russia's abuses, which included credible reports of enforced disappearance, torture, cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment and punishment, harsh, life-threatening prison conditions, on and on and on, disappearance of journalists, violence against journalists, unjustified arrests, prosecutions of journalists, censorship, serious restrictions in internet freedom, substantial interference with freedoms of peaceful assembly, extensive gender-based violence, systemic restriction on workers' freedoms. But again, it's because Russia invaded, so that's why they're so bad, I guess.
No, because you can compare this report from at least the last 15 years, and this has said the same thing about Ukraine because this report is annual. We covered it last year. We could see that it was in this report for at least the last decade. So they know, but they just have been given a pass, a trump card, if you will, because they're like, yeah, but Russia's doing these bad things. Ukraine is still doing the bad things. Russia's doing them too, but it's okay.
We just saw a literal Nazi throwing a guy in a truck.
Yeah.
Like literally. Okay. But that's
this report just, it seems like if I was given the assignment of doing a paper on Thomas Edison and I just spent the entire time talking about Nikola Tesla and then spent maybe 5% of it actually talking about Edison. It's like you didn't really follow the assignment here.
Right.
No.
Your assignment was Ukraine, and here you're talking the entire time about Russia. Okay. There's no mention, by the way, of Gonzalo Lira, American journalist who was brutally killed by the Ukrainian government, held against his will, arrested, tortured, killed. There's no mention of that in here at all.
It does say violence or threats of violence against journalists.
Yeah.
So that counts, but we don't get to know that one of them was American.
So here's the final quote from the report. The government often did not take adequate steps to identify and punish officials who may have committed abuses, of course. So again, $61 billion we're sending to this country on top of the millions per week. And now 10 years, the 10-year plan in order to make sure that we are at war in a perpetual war. Let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. YouTube thinks that you'll actually like this next video right here. It's personalized based on your own viewing habits. So if you watch the video, please leave a comment. Let us know what you think about it. And we will see you next time, everyone.